Stitch and Witch podcast, the podcast where we talk about the intersection of spirituality and creativity. Today on the show, I have my good friend Shannon Bowring, who I went to Stonecoaster MFA program with. Shannon, on I believe it was my second residency, was there just visiting to see what the program was like. And I was sitting on the green couch knitting like I always am at residencies, and got talking to her about the program and what it entailed and her experiences with libraries and a whole bunch of things. And we just immediately connected. And I was so happy the next semester to see her there in a workshop. I was so excited because Shannon's a fantastic writer. And I think that she and I will have a lot to talk about today about how our creativity has gotten us through the last couple of years of both of us having this unique MFA experience. So welcome to my podcast, Shannon.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. So you're going to graduate in January, and barring, COVID complications, I'll be there, which I'm really excited about because we're finally going to get the graduation for all of us who have graduated during the pandemic, which is so cool. I get to see everybody. But the reason I invited you on the show was because you had been posting about your process of making sure you keep writing after your MFA. And I want to talk about that because I had similar noble goals, and then a pandemic threw them all out of whack and have very much struggled to keep up with my writing goals. Much to I was going to say Tom Kosh, but really much to everybody's disappointment, I think, including my own. So let's start there with your goals of writing post MFA.
So I fear that I will also have a noble plan and then it will fall apart. If I don't stay focused on a project, I'm just spinning my wheels with nowhere to go. So I have goals to keep revising the thesis, because as you know, the thesis is never done, right? Because that's the book that I'm trying to query to agents, that I'm trying to get out into the world. And I can't stop myself from going back and editing it over and over. But I'm also working on a lot of auto flash fiction pieces lately, kind of weird, this weird blend of some of it's pulled from my own life growing up in Aroostook County. Some of it's completely made up. And I really like the flash form because it's like a release valve from writing the longer form fiction. So I'm hoping I can stick with that. And I have a couple other longer projects in mind, but they're not fully fleshed out yet. So I'm just I'll be experimenting with those. And I really hope that I can get in because with Stonecoast, even if you are in a regular schedule, every day you're writing 4 hours, you have deadlines and you have to get your shit in on time. So I think I'm going to have to create deadlines for myself, or else I'm going to do the Aquarius thing where I just start a bunch of stuff and never finish it. So big aspirations. Hope I can follow through.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel that so bad. Dan McMinn, who graduated my first residency, I think, or my second, I don't know, but he has a theater group, or he and a couple other people started a theater group, and we meet up once a month. And I say we very loosely because I haven't attended in the last 2 months. But normally we all meet up once a month and we read each other's flash scripts, 10 minutes or less scripts, which has really, that's the only thing I've written in the last year since graduating was those 10-minute scripts. And I've written a few of those, but flash fiction really is so much easier.
Right. It's good. Flash is great for the writer, but also for the reader. We all have such limited spans of attention right now that I think it's really speaking to the moment.
Yeah.
It's, I don't want to say easily digestible, because I think Flash can be really hard hitting, but at least you can sit down and read it quickly, and then you can just think about it for a long time afterwards.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I definitely don't think it's necessarily, I think easy is the wrong word for flash fiction. Yeah, I think a lot of times flash fiction is harder because you're trying to cram so much into such a small format.
Yes, and every word has to count, right? Every word has
Yeah.
to be right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like writing a children's book. With children's books, you have limited words on the page and you have to like really make it count. And if you look at, because, you know, as a nanny, I read a lot of children's books. And if you look at the best children's books, like my friend Eric Pinder, he was one of my mentors in my bachelor's program. And he is a children's book author. And he and I and a 5-year-old I used to nanny, who's now 8, we together spent a week determining one word on one page of one of his books. And the book is out now, but it was the word combined with the way the illustrator was illustrating it. And he and I we believed one thing about it, and his publisher had a different feeling about it. And so we consulted a 5-year-old because it's meant for him. So why not ask a 5-year-old, right?
Yeah, they're the expert.
Yeah, but the amount of effort that Eric put into determining how to make that one word work with that one image was just, it was a real eye opener for me onto like how hard children's book writing is. Where I was like, wow, that's really where it's at. It's so hard.
It would be hard. I've never attempted a children's book, but I
did actually write one this summer. I was commissioned by a library. My spouse and I were commissioned by a library to do a series of, it was a book, but we did it in coloring book pages. So that the children over the course of like a month and a half, they met every Saturday and did a couple more pages of it. And then by the end of the summer, they had a book.
Hey, that's a great idea.
Yeah, it was really cool.
What library was that for?
That was the Mexico Public Library, which my mom's the librarian there.
Yeah,
so.
I might have to keep that in mind. That could be a good patent-free library program too.
Yeah. We have experience. We know what we're doing. We've done this once before. She had it was to go with her summer reading program, and she had this puppet that she wanted to kind of bring to life on the page for her children at the library. So we did this series of coloring book pages for the library, and it was cool. I mean, you know, we got paid for it, so whatever. It's cool.
Hey,
anytime a writer gets
great.
paid, right?
Yeah. It's such like a mythical thing. What, writers can get paid?
I know, right?
I've heard of this.
I was just reading a bunch of tweets. A friend of mine who has been on my podcast before, he was doing like a whole series of tweets about how sick and sad it is that we don't like expect to pay writers. And how we need to change that.
We do. We really do.
In a lot of, it's really like, when you think about it, entertainment is one of the top exports for America, and yet we don't respect the arts or creativity. And how odd is that?
I completely agree. It's infuriating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you and I have talked before, and you can go into this as in depth as you want, or we can avoid the subject completely, and I can edit out all of what I'm saying right now. You and I have talked before about your various health issues pertaining to your writing and how that's impacted your work. And I'd love to discuss that more, because I think that really touches a lot on how writing can help us cope and help us with our mental health aspect of everything, which is like all I'm doing for the last year and a half. So
yeah, I'm happy to share my mental neuroses with people. So I was born with a couple congenital heart defects. And so from the age of, like newborn to about 6 years old, I was in and out of hospitals. I was having multiple surgeries, including 2 open hearts. And, this was 1990s in Northern Maine. And so even though I was getting really great healthcare, no one really was thinking that down the road this was going to impact my mental health, because you don't talk about that in 1990s rural Maine. And you probably don't really talk about that in 2021 Northern Maine.
Right.
So I struggled with anxiety my entire childhood. And a lot of it was that, but no one knew that. And so it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I officially got the diagnosis of PTSD. And at first I struggled it was a combination of things. I was happy to have a name for what I was feeling all the time. But we have also heard that PTSD is for soldiers or people who survive sexual assault trauma, that's not my experience. But the more I've sat with it, the more it makes sense that all of the anxiety that I feel is directly connected to my, the experiences I had as a kid. So because I was immunocompromised when I was so young, I couldn't go out and hang out with other kids my age. So a lot of my time was spent sitting in my room, reading books, and writing my own stories. And reading was the way to escape Ashland, Maine, and to escape thinking about my health problems. And writing was the way that I could create my own reality, which, because in my own life, I didn't have control over any of the stuff that was happening to me. But when you're a writer, you get to play God a little bit, as you know, and we're all kind of narcissistic like that. And so writing was it's been the thing I've turned to my entire life for solace and comfort. It's been the one constant throughout everything. And the older I get, the more I'm appreciative that I had that going for me. And I had parents who, even though we were growing up in such an isolated, interesting area where education isn't really valued, right? But my parents worked their asses off. My dad worked at a lumber mill, and my mom did a bunch of part-time jobs, everything from registering moose at the tagging station to working at the one stop. It's just salt of the earth Maine people. And they made it a priority to have my sister and I read all the time. Our house was filled with books. They would read to us at bedtime until we were old enough to read back to them. And without that foundation, I don't know how I would have coped with any of the PTSD shit I was going through. So big thank you to Mom and Dad for introducing me to words and stories and showing me that there are other ways than this, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar, I used books and writing both from a very young age to escape childhood trauma. I feel like that's really common.
Yeah.
It's common for artists in general, but I feel like it's especially common with writers that's how we became what we are, I guess.
Yeah. I don't remember who said it, but there have been multiple quotes, but one of them is anyone who's traumatized in childhood is going to go on to be a writer or something like that. Yeah.
I think it's so true. And then alongside that is the whole, if you want your children to write kindly about you, don't be assholes. If you want them to write nice
right,
treat them well, right? Which is something I think I talked to Ron Curry Jr. about this quite a few times, that there's a freedom in writing about your life after your parents have died, that my parents are still living, but I definitely I struggle to write honestly, and I think my inhibition about that holds me back in my writing far too often, that I don't say, or I don't make characters the way that they should be, because I'm trying not to upset various people from my childhood who still have that emotional hold over me.
Yeah.
7 years old, but whatever.
No, that's the thing. There have been one of the longer form projects I have in mind is very much rooted in my family history. And so many of the people are still alive that I can't do it, even though it would be a great story. I just can't bring myself to do it. I
think that short fiction though thing that we were talking about a few minutes ago has kind of, I think in a way I'm recently exploring that, but in a different medium, because I've been making TikTok videos about growing up the way that I grew up, talking about being a child of hoarders and some of the trauma of my childhood that I can explore on TikTok, because I know my parents don't know how to work that app.
Yes. Yeah.
And so long as they don't, I'm safe there.
Right. My mother she knows I'm on Instagram now, but I won't show her how to get on it, because I just want a place where she's not getting on there all the time, because she follows all my
we
Facebook
all were ruined when all our parents joined Facebook, man.
I know. I know. Oh well.
It was so much easier back when it was MySpace and none of them knew how to work it.
I barely knew how to work MySpace, though, to be fair.
I was only on there for 2 years before Facebook became a thing, because I didn't have a computer in my house until I was 20. So because again, Maine,
Right.
So how do you feel that the pandemic has impacted your MFA experience outside of, like, obviously it's impacted how we experience the MFA itself because residencies have all been online.
Yeah.
But beyond that, do you have concerns about how it's impacted your experience?
What's interesting is that I don't have a basis for comparison, right? Because the pandemic, it was my entire MFA experience. So someone like you were in for a semester before, but I wasn't. So I don't know how, I don't know if, I don't know. I guess I just don't know.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how that plays out in the future with all of us that have kind of been along this gradient, and how we all end up feeling about it. Because I do feel like one of the things that I discussed with the directors like early on in the pandemic was that that first residency, I felt like we were missing a lot of the personal connection we made with people between events at residency, like eating lunch together and such was gone.
Right.
And they tried to remedy that with like breakout rooms and stuff, but it's still not the same as like running into an author you admire in a hallway. Right.
I agree. Yeah. I actually think in some ways it was better for me because I feel like I'm not great in person, right? Social anxiety. But when we do the residencies online and I have my cozy little room, it's easier for me to connect.
Yeah.
Even though it's on a screen, I feel like it's just easier for me.
I do feel like we had an added bonus of having worked together on the literary journal. And I think having those Zooms in between residencies made a huge difference in our experience.
I agree. I feel really lucky. I mean, even with the pandemic, I've managed to build up an incredible writing community. And a lot of the people like you live not very far away from me. So when this is all over, we could get together in person.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have that. But I also have people that I just stay in touch with online, like Natalie Harris, Spencer. And just yesterday I had a beer with Amy DeGroat, which was really lovely.
Nice. Amy and I talk every week about how we're going to hang out, but we're really good at saying we're going to and never actually hanging out. And the pandemic has not helped that one bit. Like, yeah, it's been, 3 years of me and Amy saying we're going to hang out.
I know. I was surprised that we actually followed through. I am notorious for canceling plans. Oh,
I'm with you. I'm the queen of that. But I don't cancel Zoom plans usually. Except my theater group that I never seem to end up at lately. But talk to me about the actual act of writing. This might be I might ask this question 3 different ways before we find the right way to ask it. But talk to me about the act of writing and how that intersects with your mental health and how that helps you and how you work through things through that.
So the act of writing, as you know, when you are fully entrenched in a story, that's the only place your mind is. So it doesn't give me the opportunity to be a million different directions where I normally am in everyday life. So I'm writing my story. I'm not thinking, is the cat running outside? Is the door not closed? Did my husband remember to pick up? Like, I'm just so focused on it. But then when I leave the page, it's more jarring to come back into reality. But just having that space where I can sink into something and my brain is completely focused on it has helped my anxiety tremendously.
It's meditation. I mean, that's what my last episode, the guest that I had on, my brain's just completely like erased her name in this moment. Suzanne Colon. She and I talked about how the right form of art can be meditation. And in that way, you're using writing as meditation, really.
It is for sure. Yeah.
And my number one goal with going into an MFA program was to write a long form something. And my thesis ended up being a series of 10-minute plays.
Yeah.
Because I just couldn't get into that space long enough and keep myself there long enough with all the anxiety of everything going on. And I still am struggling with that.
Yeah.
With all of my projects.
I struggle with longer form too. So my thesis was a linked collection of short stories because it was easier for my mind to wrap around 12 short stories than a full-length novel. So in the end, you still have you could call it a novel if you wanted to. Like, you can call it whatever you want to call it. I don't really care about the label you slap on it. But for me, I had to tell myself it was short stories, or else I would psych myself out and say, I can't write a novel. That's what real writers do.
Right. Right. I definitely feel like, and well, because I had my bachelor's of fine arts in creative writing, and I wrote a series of short stories for my thesis for that, for my senior project or whatever they called it, but essentially it's your thesis. And I really was determined that, like, going into my MFA, that was going to be I was going to finish my novel. And in the time I was in my MFA program, my novel got reduced to a series of 10-minute plays that have absolutely zero to do with my initial novel. And one day I would still like to finish that novel, but I feel like I just can't in a pandemic. I feel like until it's completely not a distraction, it's so hard for me to get my brain into that space.
Yes. Yep. I understand that. I connect with that.
It makes me wonder. I mean, I feel like I keep beating myself up over not writing longer form anything. Like, there's this voice in the back of my head that's mostly Kara Hoffman going like, you are better than this and you can do this. And I know I can. But Kara escaped to Greece and I'm still here in America. So like, I definitely feel like, and I feel like we're naming all these people that, like, most of my listeners are gonna be like, who the hell's Ron? Who the hell's Kara Hoffman? Well, anybody I name, Google them because you should read their work.
Yes, absolutely. And Aaron Hamburger.
Yeah, Aaron Hamburger. Nirvana is Here is next on my audiobooks. I bought it through Libro like 6 months ago, and I just keep getting caught up in fantasy books, but I'm gonna read that. I'm gonna listen to that audiobook next. It's coming up.
Yeah.
Because he's amazing. He was my first workshop. My first residency was Aaron Hamburger. I had him and Breeden Clark as a dual workshop team, and it was fantastic.
I did too. I had Kara with you, and then I had Aaron and Breeden.
That Kara workshop that time, that was an amazing workshop. Oh, I still talk about
fantastic.
I have probably talked about us setting our manuscripts on fire in Kara's workshop. I've probably talked about that on like 75% of the episodes of this podcast.
Because it was, so you're used to the regular workshop format, which has its purpose and it's fine. The round table, this is what works, this is what doesn't. But Kara's just such a radical. And her approach to it was far more helpful to me personally. Because in addition to being a writer, I'm an editor. And so when I could look at my own shitty manuscripts through just the unbiased editor's eyes, I'm like, oh, just burn this motherfucker. Like, it's okay. Just start over again.
Right. Just burn it.
It gave me permission to do that.
Yeah.
Like, say goodbye to the shitty drafts and work for something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gave me tools I didn't get. I think part of why, because when I finished my bachelor's degree, I've been writing for as long as I can remember. Like, I have journals in this trunk behind me on the floor. I have journals from literally the first grade.
Same.
Yeah. So it's always been a thing. I always have a journal. I always have it with me everywhere I go. Actually, I usually have 2 or 3 journals because I have a bullet journal and a writing journal and my knitting journal and my reading journal. I carry way too many notebooks for like the 21st century.
I have 3 notebooks beside me right now.
Yeah.
And 2 more on my coffee table.
Yeah. And Kara, like, after I finished my bachelor's degree, I had amazing mentors in my bachelor's program, but every workshop was what you're talking about. It was that typical, you can't do this on your own kind of workshop, which is important. Like, you need your beta readers. You need somebody else to look through your stuff.
For sure.
I'm reading a book right now that shall remain nameless, but I can tell you for sure there was not a single woman in the workshop for this novel. No woman ever read it before it was published. I guarantee you.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
And it's just like, those workshops are important. But with Kara's workshop style, so for listeners to give a little bit of more of a description, in Kara's workshop, in that workshop style, you're editing your own work through kind of guided guided editing really is what she's doing. She's giving you like look through your work for your exposition and highlight that or cross that out depending on which. I've done a couple workshops with her and I've seen her do it both ways. But get rid of it and think about how that changes your work. And it's not necessarily like you need to edit out all your exposition, but it's making sure you're hyper aware of where you're doing that, right? So what Kara's workshop gave me was in many ways, not just like the catalyst for how to edit my own work, but the confidence to do things like start a podcast and a YouTube channel, because she gave me the power to look at my own work critically without being embarrassed and to shun my own ego in that work.
Yes, that's a great way to describe it. In other workshops, the more traditional form, you come away from it feeling like you do feel a little bit of that embarrassment, right? Yeah. Because everyone at Stonecoaster is fantastic and kind and very thoughtful. But if you submitted a bad story, you're going to hear it's a bad story, and that weighs on you. But with Kara, the story I submitted that first workshop is in no way connected to what I ended up writing, because that was the draft where I got to be a shitty writer writing an embarrassing story, and that was okay. And she just made me feel like this is what the process is. You shouldn't feel bad shit to get to the good shit.
Yeah, I definitely think that. And giving you that time to focus on your own work. And maybe this is what the pandemic has taken from me that I need to find a way to reclaim. By hyper focusing on my own work in that way over the course of 4 days with her gives you, this is like the Kara Hoffman like celebration episode. But it gives you
I think she'll be okay with that.
I think so too. It gives you an opportunity to shun your ego and see your work for what it is, which means that when you get to that last day and other people are talking about your work, you already know it's flaws.
Oh yeah.
So when they say, I see this flaw in it, it's not going to catch you off guard like it is in a regular, more traditional workshop.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I need to, honestly, like I started this podcast, 90% of my inspiration for starting this podcast, which I don't even know what episode I'm on now. This might be like 15, maybe. Wow. I might be overestimating that. I started it December of 2020. Yeah. And so it's been a little over a year now. And a large portion of my inspiration for it was I had finished my MFA, like my work part of my MFA. I hadn't quite gotten to graduation yet, but I finished my MFA, and I knew that there were two things lacking in my life, and that was my spirituality was lacking because I'd been so hyper focused on my MFA. And when you're balancing like a master's degree plus as many hours a week as I work, which is
a lot.
I don't even know how many hours it is. I'm kind of afraid to actually figure out how many hours a week I work. But when you're balancing all of that, there's no time for anything else. And I had gotten out of my spiritual practice. And so I'm a pagan, and my spiritual practice prior to being in my MFA program was very important to me.
Yeah.
So I started this podcast. This is like taking me forever to say. I started this podcast to get back into that, but also to use it the way you're talking about with like, wanting to make sure I kept creating after my MFA.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's your, let me ask you this, your like sit down practical method for making sure you write after your MFA. What are you doing? How are you planning? Are you using a calendar? You said deadlines, but how are you like plotting? I guess. Are you a plotter?
I don't know if I'm a plotter. I plan with good intentions. So right now, I have like this goal of I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to edit. I'm helping Natalie with her aspiring author website, which is great. That will keep me writing essays about the business side of writing. But as you can remember, I'm in that strange limbo period where my thesis is done. Residency is about 4 weeks away. I have to do my graduation presentation to figure out what I'm reading. I'm the only fiction person in our cohort, so I have to give the fiction speech at graduation.
I was the same. Yep.
Yes. So I'm impatient to be done with this phase and get into the next phase where I'm just focusing on my own things and I can make my own deadlines and do my own non-thesis stuff. But I have to stay mired in this moment too, which is I'm not done with Stonecoast.
Yeah.
So a lot of my time, in addition to working part-time and just living, a lot of my time is spent around, and I'm finishing up edits for Stonecoast Review issue 16.
Mm-hmm.
So I've felt a little bitter lately that I haven't had as much time to work on my own writing as I've wanted to.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of stolen moments of writing, but I haven't had a nice day where I could just sit down and lose myself in it for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And as a result, I'm losing that meditation. So my brain is starting to get a little wobbly. And this morning I was up at 4:30 and I just couldn't get the thoughts to stop. So I had to come downstairs and write in my journal and try to approach it that way. But if you're not in that regular practice, you definitely lose zen that comes with it.
Yeah.
Quickly, very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even just the last month or so, like I told you just before we started recording that I just moved into this office that I'm in. And I had used this as an office for a portion of 2020, but it wasn't officially my office. Getting all of my books and my art that I've started hanging up in here, getting it so it's my space. My big thing of yarn is hanging in front of me, making it my space with all of my creative outlets in it makes a huge difference. And I didn't realize, honestly, until yesterday, how important that space was to my writing practice.
Yes, I agree. I have my own little room in our house, and right now it's covered with Christmas presents for my nieces and all of the notebooks. And I have a pile of about 5 books I've been trying to read and Cook's Country magazines. And so it's never like super, super neat, but it's at least the piles of clutter are organized. And now it's just like vomit all over that's also affecting the practice because I don't have that. It's so funny how finicky we are and how things have to be just right for us to feel like it's the right time to write.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, I definitely can see that.
But we also can't wait for conditions to be perfect because then nothing would get done.
Hence my last year and a half of doing nothing.
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's not that I've done nothing. I mean, I've built up a podcast and created a whole new Etsy shop.
Yeah. You've done a lot of stuff. Please don't ever say you do nothing. You're like the hardest working person I know. Yeah.
I've done a lot. It just hasn't been writing so much.
Yeah.
Except for writing a few podcast episodes, like otherwise, and which most of my podcast episodes are interviews. So even that's not really, I don't write those. But yeah, I definitely think that I think that's good advice to think about, is that we cannot wait until that perfect time. I think for a few years there, I had a nanny gig that I had a kid who was a particularly good napper.
Yeah.
And so during his naps, I wrote, which was working for me really fantastically. Now I'm only nannying 2 or 3 days a week. And one of the kids in particular, the one I'm with on Wednesday and Friday, not only does he not nap, he's a constant, if you're not paying attention to him, he's probably breaking something kind of child.
Yeah.
So it's like, there isn't a moment to breathe with this kid, let alone write. That's not happening around him. Yep. So tell me what you're working on now. Aside from like your, tell me, you said you don't have as much time as you'd like for writing, but when you are writing, tell me about your specific projects that you have.
The flash auto fiction pieces is mostly what I'm working on. I have a collection. I have about 6 or 7 of them at this point. I've been working on them for the past couple months.
I feel like in that way that social media makes us feel bad about ourselves, I feel like every time I sign into Instagram and Facebook, somebody from Stonecoast is getting published somewhere that I have not been published and have not even submitted to. So it's my own damn fault I haven't been published there.
Yes.
But you've had a couple of things recently. Let's talk about what you've had that's published and what you have out there in the world for people to read.
So recently I had a story called Epitaphs for Almost Strangers come out in Raleigh Review. And you can read that online for, I think it's like $2 to read online, or you can actually buy a physical copy. And I recommend that because their print copy is beautiful. And it's so exciting to actually hold a book with your writing. Permafrost just accepted one of my short lyric essays, but I don't have the specifics on when that would be coming out. That's all I can think of recently. And I'm working on Natalie Harris Spencer, a fellow Stonecoast alum, has started up a website called Aspiring Author. And the aim is to help writers with the business end of writing, like how to find a literary agent, how to submit your work. So I've been working closely with her on that. She's like an internet wizard because that's her day job. She like does websites and everything. So she understands that part of it, which is great because I do not. So she just has been assigning me articles to work on. And that's another thing I feel guilty about because I haven't had the time to plug into it as much as I would want to with all this other stuff going on. And that's another reason I'm excited for Stonecoast to be behind me so I can really dig into that and focus on that. Because going forward, I want to do my own type of writing business. So freelance editing and coaching and sharing what I've learned about the process, which is more than I thought that I'd learned. But when you actually sit down and think about it, there are some people in our program who haven't even begun to submit work yet. So if I can take what I've learned and help them out, then I'm paying it forward. And I feel like I'm contributing to the community that helped me become a better writer in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, after my bachelor's degree, I had like a year and a half of I was publishing left and right like Cody is right now. I was publishing left and right, like every time I turn around. I have like the shelf that you can't really see in the corner over here. I have like a peach crate full of all the journals that I've been published in because for like a year and a half, 2 years, I was everywhere. And then I, stopped submitting. And if you don't submit, you don't publish, right? So it's my own fault. I have nobody to blame but myself. But yeah, I definitely think it's interesting being in a master's program like that, where everybody's coming from different levels of writing. Like some people have never written anything before and other people have published like Natalie had a book deal before she finished her program. Right. And absolutely. Natalie is one of the most naturally talented writers I've ever met in my life.
Completely agree.
I cannot wait to read the final version of that book because having read portions of it, I think anybody that is listening to the podcast who's interested in the business side of writing, she and I are always on different ends of that because I did so much of that in my undergrad that I didn't feel like I needed it from my master's program.
Right.
And she had none of that and had such natural like writing talent to begin with that's what she needed. So we always needed different things out of Stonecoast, which put us on like different ends of every spectrum all the time. But absolutely, oh my God, she's so talented.
She's so good. She's just so good. And I feel lucky to be friends with her and to be working with her on this because she's one of those people where anything she does is probably going to be successful because she just works her ass off for anything that she wants. And it's funny because when people look at me, I'm pretty static. I like sitting still, not doing much. I don't like go out and do a lot of things, but I have a really good work ethic when it comes to writing, right? I'm 100% focused. Everything in my life is about writing. I'm always thinking about the next thing. And so Natalie and I really connect that way, where we're always planning the next phase and the one after that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I hope that rubs off on me a little bit.
Well,
I feel like I'm always planning the next project, but I'm also, I'm a multi-faceted artist. I'm not just a writer. Like I have other, I have knitwear design and I have these other things I do, which does kind of, maybe if I was only like, if that was my big focus, but it's only one of my many. So perhaps that's my issue. I don't know. Or maybe I'm making excuses to not write.
I don't think that that's an excuse. I think that's completely legitimate.
Thank you. This is why I love you.
Thank you.
Tell me in regards to the topic of the intersection of creativity and spirituality, or really what I wanted to talk to you more about was creativity and mental health. Tell me if there's anything more you feel like you want to say or that you had thought of in regards to this topic that we haven't covered.
I guess what I would say about writing and spirituality and mental health is for me, they're all connected, right? So writing is my meditative. I don't practice a religion. I believe in like the universe. I believe strongly in like numerology, and I follow my horoscope, but I'm not like crazy. I'm not over the moon about it. I'm not, just so to speak. But with writing kind of became my own type of religion, because that's when I'm at peace. That's when I'm meditating. That's when I feel connected, not just to myself, but humanity in general. And a lot of times I don't feel like that when I'm separated by my experiences that led to the PTSD. And when I'm just in my own weird introvert brain, I don't feel like I'm connecting with people. But when I'm writing, I'm 100% connected to the emotion, to the characters, to, the larger themes that extend beyond the page. So that directly impacts my mental health by making me feel okay. And the Zoloft helps too.
It is amazing what the right medication can do.
Chocolate as well.
Yes. Oh yeah. I can't. There's like, actually, I was just sitting here when I sat down and I was like, oh, I haven't put snacks in here yet because I just moved into this office. Like, I mean, literally like yesterday, my desk was standing up against that wall on its side.
Oh my God.
So the desk that my computer is now on.
Yeah.
So I literally have been like moved into this office for less than 24 hours. And I realized that I have no snacks in here. And I
That's a problem. I finished my emergency cookies this morning, so I need to restock.
Tell the listeners where to find you and your writing, because you have a beautiful website.
Thank you. It is www.shannonlbowring.com.
Fantastic. And I'll link it too so that people can find you and find your work.
Yes.
And I'm going to link Natalie's stuff too, because I really
think
that
that'd be great.
Is so important, and probably should talk to Natalie at some point on my show too.
You should. And I'm also on Instagram, shannonlbowring.writer.
Yes, you have such a good regular Instagram practice. Like, I feel like every time I go on there, there's like, oh, inspiring words from Shannon.
I appreciate you saying that, because up until I think it was January of this year, I really resisted Instagram. I'm not a huge fan of social media in general.
Yeah.
But if I want to do this next phase of doing the business side of writing, then I've got to take my own advice and show up. And that includes, unfortunately, being on the social needs. So I have not pulled the trigger on Twitter yet. I'm still afraid to tweet. Honestly,
I don't know that Twitter is essential for a writer anymore. I think 5 years ago it would have been. I think now in the last few years, Twitter got so bogged down with bots and it's good. It's good if you have a following on there. I think it's good to continue to maintain your following on there. But I think 99% of what you post on Twitter is shouting into the wind. And I don't think anybody hears it. Oh yeah, that's good to know. That reaffirms what I've thought about it myself. So, I love it. I'm on there every day. Before I get out of bed in the morning, I've checked my Twitter feed. Like, I'm on there every day. I have a horrible social media addiction and am definitely on it far too many hours of my day. The fact that I've sat here with you for almost an hour with my phone out of reach all the way over on that table is super impressive. So I'm very proud of you. I'm definitely an addict. But yeah, and I love my Twitter account and I love following, but I don't think it's I think Instagram and TikTok are getting far more feedback for people now. I'm also afraid of TikTok. That's a young person's game. I'm 32 almost. I just can't do it. I'm 37 and on there every day as well. But again, social media junkie. Yeah. I am a social media junkie. It's bad. Yeah. No, well, you're not alone. I think that most of the population is right there with you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But as I was discussing with somebody just the other day, just to pull this full circle before we hang up, I think that is a different kind of art form, especially like TikTok. It's a different kind of art form, and it is that art form that you can do in 3 minutes or less. It's that art form. It's like the flash fiction in that it's that art form that that feeds our short attention spans.
That's true. And it's 3 minutes of connecting
Mhm.
to groups that you might not have otherwise. So maybe there's something to be said for it, but I'm still afraid of it.
There are goods and bads to all, I suppose.
Absolutely.
The
Yes.
pros and the cons. Thank you so much for coming on my podcast. I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy that you did and that we had this conversation. And I have been, like I said, I've been doing this podcast for a little over a year now, and I am not as regular about putting it out as I'd like to be. But every time I have one of these conversations like this, I learn something new and think about something in a different way. So, which is really my whole goal with it all. So
yeah, it's been great. I was having a bad writer's day, and this has kind of given me that jolt of energy that I need.
Yeah.
So
sometimes I just need a
Very-
Stonecoaster person on my screen, and then I'm like, oh, I can
Yes.
write again.
yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's essential, right?
It is essential.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Stitch and Witch. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Shannon. If you are looking for any show notes or any information about the show, you can of course find it at www.stitchandwitch.com. I've been a little bit more active over on YouTube, so you can find me over there. That link you can also find through my website. And of course, all the show notes will have all of Shannon's links and everything that she is up to. I hope you have a great day, and don't forget to craft outside the circle.